Hello, hello, hello. It's me, Dr. Toomer, and it's Dr. Toomer Talks on Tuesday. And I'm here today. We're going to talk a little bit about, well, actually, a lot about what I'm talk a lot about, and that is hormones. And we have Dr. Dana Gibbs Clark here with me today, who's actually an ENT, but who is an expert on um, hormones and different things. So we're going to talk all about that. But I'm going to let her introduce herself and then we'll get right into it. And before I continue, is there an echo? Do you hear
I
an
don't hear
echo?
it. I
Okay,
do
because
not.
I'm hearing this feedback and I don't know why. But anyway, so if there is, just kind of write in the comments and let me know. And I would like to say hello to my Aunt Cynthia, who comes in every single week to listen. And I appreciate it very, very much. So, Dr. Gibbs, please introduce yourself.
Hi. Okay. I'm Dana Gibbs, as you said. I am so excited to be here with you. This is really cool. So I'm an integrative physician in North Texas, where I help people address thyroid and other hormone imbalances that have been um, missed by their regular physician. Um, and that is a new gig for me because, as you mentioned, I'm an ENT. So I just recently started this practice after retiring from my ENT job.
So, I have a question then. Um, how did you end up in hormone then if with from ENT? What made the jump from ENT to hormones?
Okay. All right. So a big part of it is my personal story because I was not always as healthy as I am today. I um, was through my teens and 20s and early 30s, I was extremely tired. I got sick all the time. Um, I just, cold all the time, sleepy all the time. There were all these symptoms. Um, but at that time, I was not overweight. And I went to my doctor and they checked my TSH, which is a typical thing to do. And they said, oh, no, your thyroid is fine. Everything's good. And so I thought, oh, well, okay, I'm just lazy. And I went on that way. And, I managed to graduate from my residency program by kind of the skin of my teeth. I'm not actually even sure how I managed it, but I was out in private practice and I was learning to do allergy along with ENT because that's kind of part of ENT. And I went to an allergy conference, and at the allergy conference, they had somebody saying, how hormones affect your immune system and all this stuff. And I went into this lecture, um, and the symptoms that the fellow had up on the slide were every symptom that I had.
Hmm.
Cold, tired, low body temperature, low heart rate, fainting, you know, the hair falling out of your eyebrows. That was another big one that was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I have that. That's so weird. How did
Hmm.
he know?
Yeah.
But anyway, he had all those symptoms up on that slide, and he said a lot of people have normal TSH and have thyroid problems. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Um, and so I went to my doctor and I said, I was an attending by this time, and I went to my GYN and I said, I would like to please try this treatment that this fellow recommended. And she said, sure, okay. And she wrote the script for me. Um, and it was miraculous.
Hmm.
It was like, oh, wow, this is what normal people feel like. This is crazy stuff. Um, all those symptoms went away
Mhm.
until I hit menopause.
Okay.
But when I found that out, I started looking. I started looking for, okay, this guy told me to take this treatment, but he didn't say why I needed it. And so I started looking and I started digging and I started reading papers, and I finally met a mentor who could tell me, here's why your TSH is normal, but everything else is not good. Um, And once I understood what was going on, I started offering the treatment to my ENT patients because ENT, a lot of ENT is thyroid. That's a lot of what we do. Um, And a lot of ENT is people who are chronically ill, like I was.
Mhm.
And I started recognizing it. Somebody'd come in and their hair would be thin on top to where you could see their scalp through their hair, or their wrists would be thick, or their tongue would be thick, or their eyebrows would be going here. And I'd be
Mhm.
like, let's check before we do this sinus surgery, let's check your thyroid hormones. And I would start them on the treatment, and they would come back 6 months later and say, and I'd be like, oh, when are we going to do your sinus surgery? And they're like, oh, no, I don't need that. I'm fine. I just want more of that thyroid medicine. And so I started realizing the power
Mhm.
of this. And so I went back to that same mentor when I hit menopause, and he had more solutions for me that were not the conventional wisdom,
Mhm.
but that also worked. And so he offered a course, and I said, I want to take your course. I want to learn everything. It didn't have anything to do with ENT now.
Mhm.
We're getting off into woo woo land here, but um,
Mhm.
I took his hormone course, and my thyroid patients in my ENT practice would start heading towards menopause, and they'd say, please write me menopause prescriptions. And I would say, no, I'm an ENT. I'm sorry, I can't. But I kept getting more and more and more interested in it. And so when I started thinking about retiring from doing ENT, that was at the very top of my mind. So here I am.
Oh, wow.
And
And
it's
before we
been
continue,
really
I just
great.
want to say a quick hello to Chris, who also joins in every week. I just wanted to say thank you for joining in.
Excellent.
Um, Now, and the other I wanted to say, you mentioned TSH quite a few times, and for those of you who are not in medicine,
Hmm.
TSH is your thyroid stimulating hormone, and it's actually produced in
Yes.
your brain in the pituitary, which kind of sits right
In
in
pituitary
the
gland.
cross section of this, um, and that
Yeah.
stimulates your thyroid to make your thyroid hormone. It's often what we check, or what many physicians check to see if you have thyroid issues. And normally, what we're looking for is if it's high, where it's like it's usually an indication of your thyroid under functioning, and if it's low it
Yes.
could be that your thyroid's over functioning. But something that you mentioned, and this is also something that I do a full panel and I look for the incongruence, not just whether they're normal or not.
Right.
And so you mentioned, and when I just for those who to explain what I mean, incongruence meaning like if your TSH um is normal but kind of a little bit higher, but your thyroid hormone is normal but a little bit lower, there's something off. And so your body doesn't read textbooks, so it's going to act like you're
Ex-
hypothyroid
ex-
even if your numbers aren't
exactly.
normal. So you
Exactly.
also mentioned that he gave you a treatment. What was that treatment, the initial treatment?
Okay. So the initial treatment was something called natural desiccated thyroid, which is
Okay.
an animal product made
Okay.
from the thyroid gland of an animal, and it has more than so I got to step back just a second, because when most people are given thyroid hormone, they are given um, synthroid or levothyroxine, which is
Mhm.
T4, and T4 is only one of the types of thyroid hormone that your body makes. And there are um, that and T4 is the storage hormone. So it's very stable. You only have to take it once a day, or this conventional wisdom is that you only have to take it once a day.
Mhm.
It's easy to manage, it's slow to change. So that's what most doctors give people. But the natural desiccated thyroid, because it comes from an animal's thyroid gland, has T4, but it also has the active form T3 in there. And the ratio is a very specific 4-to-1 ratio. So it's 20% T3 and 80% T4. Um, you can get synthetic T3 and T4. So you can get different ratios, because what I have discovered over the course of learning from this mentor and treating people is that 80-20 ratio isn't always right for everybody. But
Mhm.
it's not necessarily everyone that needs the T3 and the T4. It's only certain people. And what I discovered as I was looking into this and reading in the literature, is that there is a subset of people who don't naturally convert. So you can have a normal amount of T4 in your body. You can have a normal TSH and a normal T4 and not convert T3 correctly. And T3 being the active form,
Mhm.
that's what stimulates your metabolism to move forward. So we look for the ratio of T4 to T3. And I also look, and this is something, Dr. Toomer, that you may not know, I look for something called reverse T3,
Mhm.
because what reverse T3 is a byproduct of the T4 that your body makes when it's under a lot of stress.
Okay.
And um, that reverse T3 was, for a long time, it was thought that that was an inactive metabolite. It didn't do anything in your body. But the truth of the matter is that what it does is it blocks the T3. So
Mm.
you can have a lot of T3 and a lot of T4 and have reverse T3, and you still don't get the function of your thyroid to be normal.
Mhm.
So what this gentleman taught me in this course was how to determine the ratio of the reverse T3 to the T3 and tell whether you have optimum thyroid function or not.
Okay.
Because if you don't, you can have every symptom of low thyroid and your metabolism is not acting efficiently and you feel terrible and you find it extremely difficult to lose weight. That's one of the things that happens with low thyroid, is that you can eat bark and twigs all day long and
And you still.
still gain weight.
Mhm.
and,
I see
and
that
if your
often.
thyroid is not properly
Mhm.
balanced.
Yes. And this is I'm glad you said that because sometimes I do come up with up against resistance when treating someone for thyroid issues based on their symptoms rather than their
Hmm.
numbers. I was always trained
Hmm.
treat the person, not the numbers. And if it
Yes.
quacks, it's a duck. And so if you have all the symptoms of hypothyroidism,
Yes, of
I
course.
treat them as if they have hypothyroidism. But one of the
Yes.
things you did mention that I have not done is again conventional treat with synthroid, levothyroxine, the
Hmm.
synthetic form of T4, and not
Hmm.
even considering using T3. So
Yeah.
that is actually something I learned today.
Yeah.
And um but it is what but the weight gain, the difficulty losing weight is why we focus so much on thyroid. And can
Yes,
you so you
absolutely.
mentioned something, what is it about your thyroid and your metabolism? How are they tied together?
Okay, so when you have stress for any
Mhm,
reason, um, it raises your level of cortisol.
mhm,
And one of the side effects of high cortisol is to convert the enzymes in your body that make T3 into making this more reverse T3. And I will tell you that if you don't think that a calorie restricted diet is stressful, you are not correct, because calorie restriction is very, very stressful to your body. And so what a lot of people talk about is their metabolic set point. And what I think metabolic set point is the amount of this reverse T3 that your body is making. And you can look at that and you can actually measure a ratio. You can say, okay, I have um, 21 picograms per whatever of reverse T3 and 100 of T3, and that gives you a like a 5-to-1 ratio.
mhm,
And what I have found is that if your ratio is better than 10-to-1, 10 to 15 or so, then your thyroid is working pretty well. But if you have a lower ratio than that, if it's 4-to-1, 6-to-1, like that, then the patient is not going to feel well, and you can actually fiddle with their thyroid and help them feel better.
sure. Mm,
Um, and then I just want to mention one last thing, because reverse T3 is made from T4. Sometimes you will find that if you give a person, you said you have your person and they are symptomatic with their low thyroid. If you give that person more T4, which is synthroid, it will actually make their ratio worse.
Mm.
And they
Mm.
will feel, and you probably have experienced that, where
Absolutely.
you give somebody synthroid and they don't feel better. And it's like, what the heck? They have every symptom. How come they don't feel better? This is the reason. And the reason for that is because the T3, I'm sorry, the T4 to reverse T3 is a defense mechanism that your body made up that fights against something called Graves' disease. And Graves' disease is a disease where you have too much thyroid hormone in your body. And if you have too much and all your energy is just burning up and you're basically starving to death,
Mhm.
because you're burning your calories so fast.
Too
And
fast.
so it's evolutionarily, it's a defense mechanism to keep you from getting too fast.
Yeah,
And so the more T4 you feed into it, the worse the
the
problem
worse it gets.
gets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
it's sort of, along the lines of, and this is maybe going off on a tangent, but giving someone who's insulin resistant more insulin to try and overcome their high blood sugars. It just doesn't,
precisely.
you know.
Precisely. Yeah.
So,
What you have to, yeah, exactly.
yeah, and the other thing you did mention that a low calorie diet causes stress. And one of the things
Hmm.
that I often mention is that our brain is designed to keep us from starving. It's to keep us alive. And there's two
Yeah.
things help us stay alive. One is procreation, so we're often wired for that. And the other is to
Hmm.
keep us from starving. So our brain is very sensitive to when we starve to stop it from happening.
Yeah.
And so
It's
that
like,
would
oh
make
my God, we
sense.
have to slow down the metabolism so we don't starve to death. There's no food.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so often you hear people say, I was on vacation and I ate so much more and I came back and lost weight. Well, two things. You were probably more relaxed, so your cortisol was down. And the other is that
Hmm.
your metabolism picked up because you were feeding your body. And so
Hmm.
so when it comes to the thyroid, now you mentioned that testing for um what we know conventional testing is, TSH first, and then
Hmm.
T4, T3, and then binding, the T3 binding
Yes.
protein. Where do you test for all the other components of thyroid
Yeah.
that you mentioned? Because from what I remember, that's not a conventional or typical test that you would test for.
No, it's not. So you order the test reverse T3
Okay.
and you order the test total T3. And the reason you need to order total T3
Mhm.
is because reverse T3 is a total or okay, so I got to step back a second because when you check total T3, the reason you have free T3 and total T3 is because free T3 is the stuff that's circulating in your bloodstream that's not bound up by proteins.
Okay.
Whereas the total T3 is the free and the bound
In the bound.
together. Um, if you tried to check free reverse T3, there's so little of it in your blood typically that it's below the lower limit of detection by the test.
Okay.
And so so there is no free reverse T3 test. And so
Ah.
to get that ratio that I was talking about, you
Mhm.
check total T3 and then you compare it to the reverse T3. You put the total T3 number on top, reverse T3 number on bottom. You do a simple division and you get that number. And the number is anywhere between, the worst one I've ever seen was about 2.5.
Okay.
That person was so god awful sick. Up to, I've seen them be as high as like 18, which is also not so great, but kind of happy in the middle, 10 to 15. That's where people feel pretty good. Um, so I test the free T3 because I like that to be kind of right in the middle of the normal range because the
Okay.
free T3 range goes from like 2.2 all the way up to 4. And
Mhm.
what I've found is that anybody who's under about 3.1 isn't going to feel well.
Okay.
Anybody who's way above 4 isn't going to feel well. So I like it to be tight right in the middle of that range. And then I also test free T4. And I actually like free T4 to be kind of at the bottom end of the normal range. And I know that sounds weird, but like I said, the more T4 you have, the more reverse T3 you sometimes have. And so I like to see 0.8, 0.9 on the free T3 or free T4, excuse me. And then TSH, the thing about TSH is, once again, the range is just huge. The range goes from 0.5 all the way up to like 4.5. And, everybody I've talked to, cardiologists, everybody says if your TSH is above about 3, your cholesterol is going to be bad. All your numbers are going to be bad. So people who are smart agree with me that the upper end of that range is not really where people should be.
What is it? And that's when you
Um,
start looking at symptoms
yeah,
rather
well,
than
definitely you have symptoms, but I've seen people with 1.5 TSH who still have the symptoms, and it's like, okay, so where do we go within that reference range? And what I like to see is between about 0.5 and 0.8 on the TSH. I don't like to see, that first fellow that told me to take natural desiccated thyroid, he was okay with your TSH being all the way down into the minus, not minus, but point
yeah.
zero zero something something. And
Okay.
I don't find that to be helpful at all.
Okay.
I don't like to see that. So I do like it to be within the normal range, but at the very bottom end of the range.
Okay. And so for anyone who's listening who's not a physician, who, isn't very familiar with um, thyroid metabolism or anything else, when it comes to their feeling and how they're feeling, what do they tell their doctors then to say, this is what I need to be tested for? And then the question is, are
Right.
these tests covered by insurance?
Yes, the tests are covered by insurance.
Okay.
So what I encourage people, if you've never had your thyroid tested, I actually want to add 2 extra tests to that, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But you start with the TSH and the free T4 and the free T3, and then the total T3 divided by the reverse T3. So you have 5 numbers there. Um, and like I said, you can be in the quote unquote reference ranges and still not be normal. So you really need to find a doctor who knows how to interpret those in the way that I'm talking about. And but then the next thing is there are 2 antibody tests, and the most common reason for people to have um, disturbed thyroid balance or thyroid disease is something called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It's an autoimmune disease. It is the most common autoimmune disease, and it is also the most common thyroid disease in the United States. It's between 12 and 20% of Americans, and that's pretty remarkable to have that many people having a condition um, for as little attention as is paid to it. Um, but there are 2 antibody tests that you do to find out if you have that, and one of them is called thyroglobulin antibody, and then
Mhm.
the other one is called thyroperoxidase antibody. And if you have both of those antibodies, um, it is very likely that you have an autoimmune thyroid disease that will eventually cause your thyroid gland to, if it continues, it will cause your thyroid gland to fail and not function properly.
Okay.
Um,
And
but
so if
about,
someone
yeah,
has this, so would you recommend then taking, because if anything's found, the first thing that's going to happen is someone's going to get synthetic thyroid hormone.
yes.
So then
Yeah, and I
so
don't
how do you
disagree
get
with synthetic
desiccated?
thyroid hormone. I don't I
Pardon?
don't disagree with I don't disagree with using synthetic thyroid hormone. What I disagree with is only ever given people T4.
Okay. And so where do you get um desiccated thyroid, animal thyroid?
Well, so you desiccated thyroid is there are several brands. There's Westroid, there's Nature Throid. Actually, that one I think has been temporarily pulled off the market. There's something called Armor Thyroid, NP Thyroid. Now, these are with some regularity not covered by insurance.
Okay.
My insurance actually recently stopped covering, and I was really pretty pissed. But you can get the synthetic version of T3 and take
Mhm.
T4 and T3 in the synthetic versions. They are identical to the thyroid hormone that your body makes.
Mhm.
They're chemically identical.
Okay.
Um, so they are a hormone, not a drug, as far as
Yes.
I'm concerned.
Okay.
So whether it's synthetic or whether it's not synthetic, um, I think it's a little bit semantics,
Mhm.
but
Okay.
they are FDA approved and covered by your insurance.
Okay. So my question now is, who do you help? How can they find you? And what should they expect when they find you?
Okay, so I help people, kids
Mhm.
16 and up, and adults who have thyroid and hormone problems.
Mhm.
My license is in Texas.
Mhm.
I also have medical license in Iowa, so I can see both those people. I do virtual and in-person visits in North Texas, and my website is www.danagibbsmd.com. Now, I do want to mention that I have a course for patients that talks about not only thyroid, but it talks about PCOS, it talks about insulin resistance, it talks about adrenal problems and stress. It talks about vitamin D and why that's absolutely crucial. And that is available on my website. If you go to danagibbsmd.com/course, you can find that. And I am going to do the sessions live again starting in October. So looking forward to that. It's going to be really exciting.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I've learned a lot actually today, and I'll probably be contacting you if I ever forget anything, or
Oh,
go back to this over again
you
because
and I need to talk some more.
yeah, I already know. There are some, I have been. There have been times when I've been kind of stumped, thinking, it's quacking like a duck, but I can't find anything. And um,
Yeah,
so then I have one last question before we go. If
sure.
someone does not have thyroid issues and they're given thyroid hormone, what happens?
If you do not have thyroid hormone issues and you're given thyroid hormone, it will probably cause you side effects. It will probably cause your heart to speed up. It will probably cause you to have shakiness.
Mhm.
Um, it might make you have palpitations where your heart is just speeding, racing. Um, you might feel too hot, like hot flashes. Um, you might have diarrhea. So, people who don't need thyroid hormone should not take it. It is not a weight loss drug. Absolutely not.
And that's why I asked, because it's requested quite often.
It
All
is
right.
absolutely not a weight loss drug.
Well,
Oh,
thank
and let's talk about that. So even if you do need your thyroid fixed,
you. Mhm.
it's still not a weight loss drug. I mean, you
No,
could maybe get 10 or 15 pounds of weight loss from getting your thyroid balance, but that does not, it's still not a weight loss drug. It is
no, and
still not
it's
a
only going to
substitute.
address the part of weight gain that was caused by any the thyroid imbalance. And
Exactly.
once that's
Exactly.
corrected, it stops. So it's not like
Exactly.
it's not a magic pill,
No, I
at all.
mean, for me, it felt magic, but at the time, I didn't really have much of a weight problem. My weight problems didn't start until I hit menopause.
Which is common. That's
Yeah.
not unusual. So, of course, then you have the estrogen. You can get into that all day. But,
Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother topic.
a whole nother discussion, which we can have again. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for coming thank you, all of you who joined. If you watch later, please put in hashtag replay so we know that you've been there. Oops. And that's my still saying your time's up. My time.
Oh,
Of course.
okay.
But thank you, thank you, thank you for coming on. And I definitely want to have more discussions along these lines because I think there's a lot more that we can discuss and talk about. And there's a lot of overlap between what you do and what I do. And
I think
I'm
so.
looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
absolutely. All
All right.
right. I
Good
enjoyed
night,
it very
everyone.
much, and we'll talk again soon.
Definitely.
All right. Love it. Bye bye.